Okay, now the meeting is officially live.
Great. I will call the meeting to order of November 17th, 2020. Well, the first order of business before I get on to anything is the approval of minutes from October 20th. I have read through that and the minutes seem fine to me. Is there someone else in the ADR that wants to second that and or correct any problems with the minutes?
Read and second, they're fine to me.
Great. Great. Okay, so we approve those minutes. And then before we start the real meeting, we have open time for public comments. If anyone wants to make any comments on something that is not an agenda item for this evening, they are free to speak now. They can virtually raise their hand and you'll be let in to speak. Okay, so just to let people know how we conduct these meetings, because many people are first timers in these meetings, a project is presented by the town who gives a brief summary of it. At that point, the project owner or their representatives give any type of presentation they want. The ADR members ask questions and for clarifications. At that point, we open it up to the audience, and anyone who wants to speak about a project or voice a concern is welcome to do so. There's usually a 3-minute time limit for these comments. And at the end of these discussions, we then bring it back to the ADR for our final recommendations to the town council. The first item on the agenda is 1 East Road, the Codemer residence, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Thank you, Chair Krushnet, ADR group members, Planner Matthew Weintraub. I'll give my brief staff presentation. The project before you is the Codemer residence at 1 East Road. The owner is Charlene Codemer, and the applicant is FT Engineering with Sky Garrison as the lead. And this is the front elevation of the property. This is a photo from actually a couple of years ago that I actually grabbed off of Google Earth, but the property is essentially the same with perhaps some different landscaping. The entirety of the work would be located behind the residence, so it wouldn't be essentially visible from the front of the property. The project site is a triangular lot, a little over 6,000 square feet, with road frontage on both the front and the back, and a residential neighbor to the east side. Some construction history: originally constructed in 1938, and in 2015 approval was granted to begin basically renovating the existing residential property. The current project description, again, the area of work is located in the rear and the east side of the property. Is to construct a new 5 to 7 foot tall concrete retaining wall, which would essentially extend an existing wall. And I'll move my mouse to show where the location of the existing wall is. And the new wall would essentially extend in this area here, and also renovate the existing rear yard and side yard patios in this area, which are existing non-conforming patios to be renovated in essentially the same locations, and also installing a new 6 foot tall side yard wood fence and gate approximately right across this area, across the east yard to screen the property. And here are some renderings of the project. We see that there is an existing 7 foot 3 inch concrete retaining wall along the back of the property here. The project would essentially extend and step down a new concrete retaining wall all the way in this direction towards the east. Here's another view of that retaining wall, how it would come down to the east and then go along the east property line and then return over to the east property line. Also to be installed or proposed is a 12 inch tall metal planter area in this location, as well as new bluestone paving over the existing patio area. And then it looks like this rock wall would just be realigned to extend over to the new concrete wall. Here are some pictures of, or images of materials, the concrete wall, of course, and bluestone pavers with planted joints. Sorry about that. There were no public comments received on this project. And in conclusion, staff requests that the ADR group discuss the merits of the project and provide a formal recommendation to the town regarding the merits of the project consistent with design review criteria and standards. I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. Is there anyone on the ADR that has any questions for the applicant? No. Wait, I looked at the project from the street in back of it. And to me, the project seems fine. It is far below the street level. And then the neighbors, of course, are across, the nearest neighbors are across the street. It doesn't seem like it would be invading anyone's privacy to have that deck down there. My one comment to the homeowners would be that they should take a good look at the existing fence that runs behind the property, because parts of it seem that they're a little bit in disrepair. And if I were them, I'd be a little worried that it might come down at some point, which of course they would hate to have happen. So they might want to just see if any of that needs to be shorn up. And actually, if no one on the ADR has any questions, we can then open it up to the public before we come back with our recommendations. Is there anyone in the meeting who wants to comment on this project?
Or is there anyone to present it, right, Mark? Is there anyone from the project team that would wish to describe it other than the way that Matt did?
I'm the applicant. I'm with FTF Engineering. And as you mentioned, one of the reasons we want to put up the wall is to help mitigate there's erosion, and then that fence, you can see it is on that eroding slope, but just to help stabilize that slope behind the residence. So the structural wall will benefit in that regard also.
Right. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for her? Wait, oh,
No questions.
okay. Well, if there's then no audience questions, we can bring it back to the ADR for recommendations. Mark, since you spoke up, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a pretty straightforward project. I would be in full support of it. I don't have any questions, concerns. Existing patio, rear side yard, way below the street level. Can't see it from the front. Mitigating what is a very steep slope. So, no concerns with this one.
Okay. Joey?
No concerns. I actually should tell the applicants I was very involved in the remodeling of this property in 2015, so I know it well, and it really needs this. It needs, the back area with that retaining wall. They really need to fix that back there. So I'm happy to see they're doing it, and I think it'll make their space a lot nicer, and I have no problems with it.
Stephen?
Nope, full support. I didn't see a lighting plan. I don't know if any exterior lighting is part of the program here.
None is proposed as part of the project.
Yep, okay. Yeah, I'm in full support as proposed.
Okay. And I agree with everyone else. So to sum it up, full support from everybody. Thank you for your time, and good luck as you go in front of town council.
Good luck. Thank you.
The second project is the Gamble residence at 114 Winding Way. I must say that between this and 3 Allen Way, I had trouble turning my car around on these project visits.
Yeah.
So Matthew, would you like to start off with this presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair Kushnet, ADR group members, planner Matthew Weintraub. The project is the Gamble residence at 114 Winding Way. The owner is the Gamble Family Trust, or Jane and Lee Gamble, and the applicant is Mary Buey. I apologize if I didn't pronounce that correctly. The project site is located on the north side of Winding Way. For the purposes of this application, the pertinent characteristics are that the project contains a shared driveway that serves the 3 properties at 114, 116, and 118 Winding Way. The driveway essentially runs along the west side of the lower portion of the property, and the property itself is steep. It's a hillside lot with 43% average lot slope. I'm not really going to cover the project history unless there are any questions about that. It's not terribly relevant to this project. The current project is to replace an existing rock retaining wall that is shown here in this photograph. This is the top of the slope, essentially from the area of Winding Way, which is below the slope. So this is the retaining wall that would be replaced with a new concrete retaining wall that would be 84 feet long and would vary from 5 feet or 5 to 5.5 feet at the ends to 11.5 feet in the center. And this retaining wall does retain the driveway itself at the top of the hill there. Here's an elevation view showing the height differentials, again, from 5 to 5.5 on the ends to 11.5 at the center. It is proposed to be faced with a rock veneer. This Bitterroot ledge veneer has been provided as the sample. And there is no additional landscaping proposed, primarily because of the slope condition at the base of the wall. There were no public comments received on this project. And in conclusion, staff requests that the ADR group discuss the merits of the project and provide a formal recommendation to the town regarding the merits of the project consistent with design review criteria and standards. And thank you, and I'm available to answer questions.
Thank you, Matthew. Mary, since you're here, would you like to add anything?
Well, thank you. The only thing that I would say is, it's over 100-year-old wall. And I think it was probably at least 3 years ago, maybe longer, that the driveway started to crack. And we noticed that if you just touched the stones of the wall, they would fall down the hill. So we patched and patched and patched. And finally, I really had a safety concern that if it failed, it would really take out the driveway. And, just for the safety of having emergency vehicles and things like that, we, finally decided to really address the problem as it should have been.
Okay, I think, it's great that you're doing it before it fails. Trying to address the problem. Does anyone on the ADR have any questions or want any clarifications on any part of the project from either Mary or Matthew?
One quick question. Were there any trees proposed to be removed or expected to be removed in this? I didn't see that.
No.
Okay.
The wall is going, back where the current wall is.
Wasn't sure if the excavation of the new wall would impact any of the surrounding trees in any way. I was just curious.
Yeah, I don't believe
Don't think so. Okay, great. Thank you.
Now I'll open it up. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question about the project or voice a concern. Okay, and if there was no one, I will bring it back to the ADR for recommendations. Stephen, would you like to go first this time?
Sure, I don't have any questions, and I'm in support as proposed with no comments.
Joey?
I am in full support, no comments.
Mark?
Same, no comments, full support.
And I am the same, full support, no comments. So great, we wrapped up 2 projects very quickly. Thank you for your time and good luck in front of town council.
Thank you.
Bye, Mary. Bye.
Now we will move on to 3 Allen Lane, and Matthew, I will let you start by presenting the project.
Thank you, Chair and ADR group members. The project is the Dodge and Stein residence, 3 Allen Lane. The owners are Andrew Dodge and Aaliyah Stein, and the applicant is Tristan Warren Architects. The project site is located on the north side of Allen Lane. It has residential properties on either side, and it backs up to the Ross Common. It's also located in a flood zone. The property was originally developed in 1956 with.
Matt, sorry, are you sharing your screen?
Oh, I should be. Am I not sharing my screen?
No,
Not yet.
Let's start over.
Thank you.
My apologies.
No problem.
So once again, the project is the Dodge and Stein residence at 3 Allen Lane. Here's the project site located on the north side of Allen Lane with residential properties located on either side, and it does back up to the Ross Common. It is located within the AE flood zone. The property was originally constructed and developed in 1956 with the existing single-family home and the detached garage. And here we have the site plan with the street frontage on the right side. So this is the front of the property. And we see that the existing garage is in front and a long one-story residence is currently in existence. The proposal is to build a second-story accessory dwelling unit on the rear L of the existing building, which is shaded here in the sort of mid-tone of gray. The accessory dwelling unit would be 880 square feet located at the second story at the back of the existing residence. The project would also involve creating new walkways around the property and connecting to the entry walkway, as well as filling in the margins of the driveway to make it a more regular shaped driveway. Here are the elevations, the front elevation or the south elevation. And what I've done is I've included the perspective rendering at the bottom of each of these elevations, since the elevations themselves often come across as flat, just to remind the eye that there is some depth to this structure. So at the lower or middle image is the existing front elevation, single family residence. And here we see the proposed second story element that would be pushed, that would be located at the rear of the residence. In the side views, here are the rear portions of the building. Here's the west side elevation of the rear, and here's the east side. And again, at the lower images, we see the existing single story residences, residence elevations. And the single story block at the rear would be basically improved to a two-story block at the rear with this ADU at the second story. And here we see the rear elevation. In addition to adding the second story block, the project would also create a new two-story stairwell that would access the new second story ADU. And I will go back to the site plan real quick to demonstrate that this would be the footprint expansion of the building to allow for that stairwell. And it would be almost, but not entirely located outside of the 25-foot riparian top of creek zone. So the project has done really good job of staying out of that zone for the most part. And here are colors and materials, essentially would match the existing residence as shown. And public comments were received. Commenters in support of the project, but providing no specific reasons, included residents at 24 Allen, 21 Allen, 5 Allen Lane, and 7 Allen Lane. And a commenter objecting to the project at 19 Allen Lane, which is the adjacent property, is concerned about potential view impacts and about potential privacy impacts of the proposed second story development. So in summary, to summarize my presentation, staff requests that the Advisory Design Review Group discuss the merits of the project and provide a formal recommendation to the town consistent with design review criteria and standards. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer questions. Thank you.
thank you, Matthew. Would either Tristan or Andrew Dodge or Aaliyah like to add anything further about the project before we ask questions?
Yeah, Mark, I think we have a sort of short introduction. I'm going to cover a little bit more of the project than I think Matthew has. And then I think Aaliyah is going to just speak about the project from their perspective and, why we're doing the project and what their goals are. So I'm not sure, but Matthew and I talked about me being able to share my screen just so that I can, use the regular song and dance and point to a few things just to clarify what I'm saying.
Great. Matthew should be able to let you do that. Thanks.
And I believe you have that capability.
I do. I see it here. Okay. So I'm going to pop up the site plan now. Can everybody see the site plan that was just referenced by Matthew?
Yes.
Okay, so just very briefly, I just want to walk through the decision of how we chose to locate the ADU on the site, why we're going where we're going, and a couple of other constraints that have come up in the project that we've endeavored to solve as we move forward with the submittal. So when Andrew and Aaliyah, who I've worked with before, came to me and said, well, we need to add more space. We need to add space for, a caregiver for our children. I'll let them sort of embellish that point. We looked at, well, how can we put an ADU or rental unit on the property? Given that this area of the site back here is basically a riparian way, as Matthew referenced, and it's in the rear yard setback, there's no easy way to put an ADU at that rear portion of the property, which would be the optimal portion for it, without, substantial disruption to water flows and whatnot. And we're already within the floodplain. So that didn't seem like a very appropriate location for the addition. We also, again, took a quick look at garage and things like that. As Matthew talked about in his staff report, the garage was subject to a variance way back in, I think, 1956. And you can see that clearly it's in a portion of the setback already. So developing anything substantial around the garage from a practical standpoint was challenging. We would have had to probably develop further back in this area, which would have had impacts on the existing residents. And from probably a more pertinent ARDB aspect, having a two-story massing, because that was the only way we were going to be able to get this while maintaining the one covered parking space requirement in Ross, would have put a two-story element in front of or adjacent to a single-story entry and living room massing that I didn't feel would have been appropriate if we could have gone that way. So bear with me just a second. I'm going to drive to a view of that. Oops. That's not the one I was looking for. Anyway, we'll go to the elevation instead. Technology. So this is the existing elevation, and we can see that the garage here is massing out nicely with the rest of the house. And so the goal was to kind of keep this here. So where ultimately that led us to where is the best place for the ADU? And it appeared to us that the optimal place was on top of the flat roof of the second story. It gave us an easy platform to build. The massing of the existing bedroom wing back there approximately fit the program and goals that we were trying to do. And it would not increase the impermeable area and was easily accessible. So ultimately, that's why we chose to go in this location. The other constraint that I just want to bring to mind is Andy and I and Aaliyah have done a project recently, and that was a remodel of the interior of the houses. So one thing that was important to them wasn't to take 3 steps forward and 2 steps backwards. So one of the constraints that drove a lot of the design decisions, and I'm sure this will come up in questioning, was working to maintain a structural design and an architectural design that minimized the impact of the existing spaces on the lower floor. And so the proposed plans, this is our lower floor here. So we have the master bedroom, master bath, hallway, master closet, powder room, bedroom. And so we understand that there's probably going to be some impacts on that to upgrade things, but we just didn't want to have, we wanted to minimize that. What that meant is in order to produce a structural lateral forces diagram for the project, it limited where we could put our windows, which drove a lot of our design decisions. And I think that that's probably all that I want to add to what Matthew has said at this point. I'm happy to, further answer this as we go through in questions. I'm happy to leave my screen open so that we can navigate through the project. I have 3D views, elevations, plans, and whatnot for any of you that have questions.
Okay. And did you say Aaliyah also wanted to speak prior to our questions and clarifications?
I muted you soon. Yes, I do believe that she has just some more of a, sort of why the project is happening and what it means to her family input on this.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add that this is an important project for us to be able to grow our family and stay in this house that we love and in this neighborhood that we love and the community that we love. I'm looking at returning to work, and we'll need live-in on-premise childcare, and we're just going to not be able to do that with the 4 bedrooms that we currently have now, especially with Andy working from home full-time. And we just really love our house, love being here, and we're excited about this design, and we hope it works. We hope it works out.
Okay, thank you, Aaliyah.
One thing I'd like to add to that is just that we did have a number of conversations about just how the house flowed and privacy and things like that to make sure that we could accommodate their needs and deal with this with the ADU.
Okay, thank you, Tristan. Before we open it up to the public, are there any questions or clarifications that members of the ADR have for the applicants? Stephen, Mark, Joey?
I have a question of Matthew. Before we give our comments, I have a question, just if he could review for us what the state requirements and what is required of us regarding ADUs.
So the project is an ADU permit, but as far as the ADR group is concerned, really you're reviewing it against the design review standards and criteria. So this, as far as the ADR group's charge, it's really to look at it as any other project, and not necessarily to consider the ins and outs of the code. I would mention or just maybe clarify something that Tristan stated, that under the current ADU codes, both at the local and state level, existing garage could actually be converted to an ADU with the non-conforming setback, and the parking would not have to be replaced. That is allowed by the code to encourage housing. It's not necessarily what the applicants prefer or necessarily what the best project is, but the code does allow for that option.
And what about FAR and square footage that is allowed to be added to the maximum FAR? Because a couple of years ago it was 500 feet, and I noticed it's kind of been creeping up. Yeah. So what is today's snapshot of what is allowable to add to the maximum FAR in order to get an ADU?
So both the state and local codes allow for up to 800 square feet of ADU space to be automatically exempt from FAR requirements. And then another 150 square feet can be added to that to provide for ingress egress. So that total really is 950, with 150 dedicated to ingress egress.
Okay.
That can be exempted from FAR by right and without any additional council approvals.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I know we have, about to open it up. Mark, Stephen, no comments before I open it up to the public?
I would love to see, Tristan, you mentioned that you have some additional perspective renderings or perspective views, and I'd love you to flip us through them very quickly. And I care less about the decision making based on structural or any other kind of infrastructure, but more just about the design of the exterior.
Absolutely, Stephen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with their entry view, which it's a little pulled in, and I'm sorry, I would go to pull back one, but it would take me a while with the technology. So what I wanted to capture here was just as you approach the house, how the massing sort of steps back as the addition, the second story addition, is far back on the back of the property, which lends itself to the scale of how you perceive this house from, I can't really call it the street because I think Allen Lane is actually a private drive, but as you approach the house from the entry. Let's see, go to a southwest view. This is just turned to the side. This is a sort of contrived view because I don't think that this view would happen. There's a good amount of screening along here on the fence between this property and the next one. But again, just the general massing of the house, the reuse of the existing roof form, and we can get that more in depth if you'd like, and sort of maintaining maintaining the vocabulary of the existing house. Then we will swing around to the northwest, looking at it back sort of from the Ross School perspective or the other adjacent neighbors perspective. Again, there is more foliage in between here than I think is represented, but clarity of what we're talking about for the design, I just wanted to kind of pull that back. And then from the northeast perspective, just another snapshot of the design. And then from the deck in ADU, forgive the lack of landscaping here, but again, the house as it sort of pertains to the primary outdoor living space of the residence. Again, this is to the north of that, so we're not obviously blocking light and sunshine, and we're respecting all setbacks with this. Is there anything else, Stephen, you want to see or hear?
No, well, I could ask one question. If you flip back to the staircase, the view of the staircase.
Certainly.
Do you think, or do you know, is the height of the stair tower, I will call it, is the height at the outboard edge or the edge that is to the right of this page, is it necessary for code minimums to ascend the staircase? In other words, if you sloped the roof of the stair tower to follow
head height,
the roof line of the main house or of the addition, would you still perform to head height requirements?
Yeah, we would still perform to head height requirements.
I understand you might choose this as a distinguishing characteristic of it, but
that is, I toyed with a lot of different things here, and I won't bore you with my process, but continuing that roof slope somehow seemed inappropriate to sort of the strong elemental forms of the gable end. And I can go into why we chose to stay with the existing vocabulary, but it seemed as I went through my sort of review of things, and I didn't settle on this initially, it seemed that doing something differentiated for the staircase somehow reinforced the simple forms of the existing house for the main portion of the addition. And so once we went to that sort of distinctive design element, it seemed appropriate to really distinguish it from simplify it and distinguish it from the rest of the building.
Okay, thank you. I have one question for you, Matthew, which is, could you orient us, or maybe whatever everyone else knows and I don't, but from whom the letter of concern comes on the site plan aerial, basically, or
from the opposite side that we're looking at it now. The side that has 4 windows on the second story. This side.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mark, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, I have just one more question. Matthew, in your presentation, you mentioned the floodplain. I'm curious to know if the existing home, base elevation of the finished floor is above the floodplain. Tristan, you may also be aware. Just curious to know what the status of that is.
I can answer that. So yes, The parcel itself was within the floodplain, but the finished floor of the house was raised to, I think, 1 foot or something above the floodplain. So from a FEMA perspective, the parcel is in the floodplain, but the residence is exempt from any FEMA taxes and whatnot.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, I know that Mr. Witkowski, who we received some emails from, has been waiting patiently. So we can go to Mr. Witkowski now for his questions, concerns, etc. before I pull it back to us for our comments.
Okay, well, I'm the adjacent homeowner, and I don't have a visual presentation. I didn't learn about this project or this proposal until last Friday when I got the courtesy notice from the town. The best thing about my house is the rear yard. It's secluded, it's private, and you can look at the trees and the sky and, you know, not see another house unless you try really hard. And I'm not sure if any of you visited the property to look at the story poles.
Yes, I believe we all did, I believe.
Yes,
From the backyard, my backyard?
not from your backyard,
Oh,
but
property.
I can imagine.
Okay, because I mean, from my backyard makes, I think, a big difference, or it certainly would put in perspective how this project, if approved, would affect me. I did take some pictures yesterday, late afternoon, and I forwarded them this evening. Have you? Had
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we
we
all
got them.
received those. Thank you.
So, okay, so there you go. So this particular view is from my my backyard, and essentially you can see that right now you don't see another house, you don't see anything but the trees and the sky, et cetera, and so forth. And if this is allowed to proceed, they're going to put this structure there. And it's big, it's boxy, it's got 4 windows that look right into the yard. And I also sent you a picture of what this would look like from my the master bedroom. You know, this doesn't seem to me to be consistent, as I pointed out in my email, with what's supposed to you know, be permitted and not permitted. You know, it seems to me when I reviewed the exhibit attachment to the proposal, the town proposal, the town plan, I guess it's called, attachment 1. I mean, one of the things I noted right away was that, you know, where nonconformities are proposed to be retained, the proposed structures and landscaping should not impair the primary views or privacy of the adjacent properties to an extent, to a greater extent than the impairment created by the existing nonconforming structure.
Just to interrupt you 1 second.
Sure.
This is not a nonconformity. A nonconformity is something that is built within the setbacks or exists within the setbacks on a site. But just to let you know that that's irrelevant. Anything to do with nonconformities is irrelevant to this project as proposed because there are no nonconformities, but please continue.
I'm sorry, I thought that the addition of the garage was a nonconformity. Because I also noted that in the application itself, it said on page 5 for the written project description, it didn't give very much detail, but it says as part of this application, the property owner is requesting it's a discretionary exemption from the ADU height requirement. Okay, excuse me, I stand corrected. My apologies. This is the first time I've dealt with this.
That's okay, it's okay.
And I had to do it really quickly. But anyway, this picture that you're looking at now is the view from the master bedroom. And as you can see that, you know, absent this structure, you can't see anything except trees and light, and it's, you know, it's private. And if they put this up, then I'm going to obviously lose that. Now, going back to the exception that they referenced in the application, if you look at, I looked at the accessory dwelling units, chapter 18.42 of the Ross Code. And there it says to get an exception as to height, and I believe that's what they're seeking here. The council may grant it an increase to 2 stories, but in order to do that, they have to look at these 2 criteria, or a number of criteria that are listed in section G. And it says that the exception will not create a significant adverse impact on any adjacent property. And obviously, I think, you know, this is going to create a significant adverse impact on my property. Had I known about this in advance, I would have solicited opinions from some real estate agents or other appropriate property professionals to be able to make that presentation. It also says that that the lot and the arrangement of existing and proposed physical improvements on the lot can accommodate the exception without adversely affecting the views or privacy or access to light and air of the neighboring properties. Well, this is going to eliminate my privacy, because right now I can sit in the backyard, nobody can see me, and I can't see anybody. And if you put this up, they're going to be able to look directly into the backyard. Another thing I would have done had I had more notice of this is I would have measured from the base of the house of you know, where the proposed addition is going to be made, to my master bedroom window, to my pool deck, to my backyard. I think there's probably less than 20 feet, maybe 10. I'm speculating now between this structure and my property line. So this would have a significant adverse effect on me. And I'm quite surprised to hear during this meeting that the existing garage could be converted to an ADU, because late this afternoon I had a discussion with Andy Dodge, and I specifically asked about that, and he said, well, it wasn't considered because we're required to have a garage. So if they need an ADU and the garage is already there, it seems to me that that would be preferable, well, certainly preferable to me, I have to say. Maybe not the expanse that they want, but certainly serve the needs that they say. And I think that's it, unless any of you have any questions of me. I mean, I sent those pictures, and I think they, you know, pictures worth 1,000 words or whatever they say, but you can see how this would really materially affect my property if it's allowed to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Lukowski. We appreciate your emails and your time participating in the meeting.
And by the way, I apologize for them being late, but like I said, I didn't get the notice until Friday, so I did the best I could in the time allowed.
That's fine. Just to clarify, Matthew, the distance between the existing house and the property line, I believe what we were shown from Tristan and yourself is that the house is not currently in the setbacks, and all of the new proposed construction is not within the side yard setbacks or the rear yard setbacks.
That's correct.
That is correct. No portion of the existing residence is located within the setbacks.
And approximately how far is it from the property line? I'm sure you have the exact number, but.
To the setbacks from the subject property.
Just the existing house to the property line.
It's right on the setback at 15 feet.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Tristan, Andy, Aaliyah, if you would like to respond to any of that, you can. If not, I'll just go back to the ADR and we will give our opinions of the project. Okay, I'm sorry, did you raise your hand, Aaliyah?
That's fine from my perspective. It's Andy. You guys can keep going.
Okay, so I'll go first on this one. I will leave some of the more detailed architectural comments to the three architects. I received Mr. Wachowski's emails, and so I went back over to the subject property to look at it again. After receiving that, one of the things that Mr. Wachowski said in his email was that Allen Avenue and Allen Lane are essentially single-story houses, and that any new project, the ADR always wants to try to have fit into the neighborhood. And so I looked and I noticed that 3 Allen Avenue is a subject property. Their next door neighbor is 5 Allen Lane, and that's a 2-story house. And then I stood in front of Mr. Wachowski's house, and the 2 neighbors across the street that are up the hill were both 2-story houses. And the brand new house built on the corner across from Mr. Wachowski is also a 2-story house. So the majority of houses there are 2 stories, and there are certainly single-story houses going up and down Allen Avenue, but on Allen Lane, the 3 houses I could see, 4, excuse me, standing there were all 2-story houses. I did look at the photos, and actually, could you put back up the photos, Matthew, from Mr. Wachowski's house?
Sure, just give me just a second.
Sure. And there was one from his master bedroom and then one from the backyard were the 2 that you had shown before.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so could you blow up this picture that we're looking at? Sorry, I know it's difficult to get all those in line.
My apologies, not fast enough.
Great, perfect. So without a doubt, you can see the second story there, as you can from any house in Ross that has a 2-story neighbor next door. And I do think it would be nice for privacy to cut down the windows looking this direction. But to me, that massing outside of the setback, while it blocks his view of the trees directly behind it, it certainly does not block the view of the whole yard. It's a fraction of the yard. And I think if we go over to the master bedroom picture, you would see the same thing, that there is no huge open view that's being blocked. No one's going to buy this house from this bedroom looking out over that pool and the bamboo and thinking that is the reason they bought it, for that view. I think it's just like many houses, including mine, that has a 2-story house next door. You see the second story, and that's certainly not unusual in this town. When I pulled up originally to the house at 3 Allen Lane, I parked in the driveway, and I was still in the car at this point. I hadn't stood up, and I was just off the street. And I sort of gave a deep sigh and thought, Jesus, they didn't even put up the story poles. And it wasn't until I stood up and started walking a little to the left that I actually saw the story poles. I actually think the ADU unit is in an excellent place because you barely even see it from the street. And the massing is nice. It's not a 2nd-story garage. It's in front. It becomes predominant. It's in the back. It's behind these massive redwood trees. I don't like the architectural detail of the stairwell. And I think that the windows could be altered, decreased, that are facing this pool. But I'm fine with the overall massing of the project, and I think the location is fine. And certainly a 2nd-story house in that area seems fine to me. Who would like to go next?
Am I permitted to comment?
No, now we're back at the ADR. The public comment section is closed.
I can't respond to one of the statements that you made.
I'll let you give a quick response.
Thank you. With respect to the comment you made about the single-story houses on Allen Avenue, I would point out to you that 3 Allen Lane, 19 Allen Avenue, and 21 Allen Avenue are single-story houses. That was my primary reference. The house at 5 Allen Lane was the subject of many appearances before the town council. It's part of the house is 2 stories, but that was part of the compromise with the neighbors. With respect to the houses on the hill that you talked about as being more than 1 story, those are 1-story houses. The garages are built into the hill, so they might appear to be a 2-story house, but they're a single-story house, as is the house directly across the street from me. I don't remember the number. And the new house on the corner used to be a single-story house when Dr. and Mrs. Dunn lived there. But it had a slanted roof, and I guess the town allowed the new owners when they reconstructed that site to put in a 2nd story. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mark, Joey, Stephen, who would like to go next?
Is that?
All right, Joey.
I'll go. I agree with Mark K in that, you know, in terms of an ADR or an ADU, sorry, its location, when you walk up to it, you can barely perceive it. I mean, Mr. Wojtkowski, I agree with you. It's probably the most perceivable from your property. So I do understand and I appreciate your concerns. However, I do feel that on that property, that is probably the least obtrusive place to put it if it's out of the setbacks. I do feel that just because the state mandates a certain amount of square footage, I don't know if that means that we are compelled or forced to say, yes, that is all allowable. But I feel that the 2nd story going straight up from the house, it looks like an apartment building. You know, it's just, I think you could pull that 2nd story in. I don't know if you really need a living room and all these things in an ADU. You basically need a kitchen, a sleeping area, a bathroom. And you could make it a little less obtrusive. You could take the windows off that face the Wojtkowski property. You could remove the windows in the stair tower that would perhaps make it a little bit of a lantern at night for the Wojtkowski property. I just think you could be a little more sensitive in thinking about light at night. I think that's actually the biggest, that is the biggest transgression here. It's not during the daytime, it's at night when that thing is lit up. And that will make it very obvious. But I think, you know, if we as a town are kind of forced to accept these ADUs and a certain amount of them, and they're happening whether we like it or not, I do think we can say, okay, this position is pretty good, but why don't you try to just shrink it a little bit and be a little more sensitive to your neighbors with the windows and the lighting at night. Otherwise, I think it's probably the best place on the property for that particular development. I just would shrink it. I would shrink it. That's my final.
Joey,
Yes.
there's some ADU applications that conform to certain criteria so that they're administratively approvable. You know, that they don't even have to come to us. And then there are others, and I'd like a little bit of clarification from Matthew on this, but others that trigger design review, basically. And so I think that the council is asking for us to forget the legalese about ADUs and just say, for this project that's proposed, can we support it under the same design review criteria that we do for other projects? And so I think I hear that you say that you can support it with some modification. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. And we've seen, you know, I think there was a project on Lagunitas where they didn't even have to go through design review. It just went over the counter,
Mhm.
and it perhaps may not have been the most attractive design. And I just think this could be bettered a little bit by shrinking and being sensitive to this neighbor who is, you know, is going to have windows all of a sudden at night looking over his property. But in terms of where to put it on the property, you know, I do think I have a bigger existential issue with, I think, a lot of this whole ADU thing. Obviously, no one's really using it as an ADU. They're using it as more square footage for their homes. So the more you can keep it as a distinct piece of your property that actually really could be rented out to a lower income person, and there was sufficient parking that wasn't going to end up on the street, that's, I think, what we need to pay attention to. But in general, I can support it. I think it needs to shrink. And I think the fenestration that faces neighbors needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be pulled back. That's it.
Would you be able to make, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, could you make some specific recommendations such that you could say if they did X, Y, and Z, that you wouldn't need to see it again? Or do you think that the issues are large enough that you want to see it again?
What do you guys think? I think in order to accomplish what I'm talking about, I think we'd need to see it again.
Okay, well, let's leave it at that, Joey. I think that's excellent. And then let's hear what Mark and Stephen have to say.
Stephen, you want to jump in, Stephen?
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think that I would concur on the location of the ADU regarding the site, right? There aren't that many other massing locations. If you wanted to convert the garage, that would be, you know, a negligible impact on the property other than the parking requirements and the covered parking. Still, you're in a one-lane street. The parking around that area is difficult, so I'm not sure that would be recommended. Putting a second story in the garage would not from a massing perspective be recommended. It would be the first and foremost thing we'd see. So its location in the back of the property is, I think, appropriate. I share Joey's concern about the massing itself. It does seem sometimes, Joey called the apartment complex, I'll call it a house drop, where something just, you know, a helicopter came and dropped this on top of the home. It doesn't seem necessarily integrated in as I would like to see. A little more articulation, especially on the area that is viewed from Mr. Rakowski's house. I think the fenestration on that side, as Joey said, is problematic. It will be a lantern in the evening. It's not that we can't see homes from our rear yards or side yards. That's the nature of living in semi-tight quarters within Ross. But I think the sensitivity isn't there. From a massing perspective, it's the full facade. You're asking for a height, exception, and you're putting that massing essentially in the location on the site that impacts that neighbor the most. So I would like to see that pull back, that facade, that upper facade, pull back, the articulation of the roof on that side dealt with so it minimizes that mass as much as possible. I think the stairwell, while interesting, like I appreciate some of the effort you're going there to articulate that in a different way, is a massive lantern, which can be seen essentially probably from Ross Common, from the adjacent properties. And I think that while an interesting architectural element doesn't necessitate it to be such a light and airy element with so much fenestration. That would be, I might actually even recommend flipping the bedroom and living room on that unit so that the majority of times someone is with lights on, et cetera, are probably going to be in the living room side versus the bedroom side, which would minimize the impact on Mr. Rakowski's property on that side, on the western side. So I think that softening that facade specifically, recognizing that there could be some additional articulation, it's very stark because the home has a slightly modern, 60s modern take to the design. And I think that's a little bit lost on what's happening on that addition. Some of what you see from the front facade, which is really interesting, isn't carried forth in the addition in in a way that is sensitive to that particular property on the western side. So I would like to see something that's pull it back a little bit. I recognize structurally, right, lining up the exterior walls is the most simple and straightforward thing to do, as you presented earlier on. But I don't believe from a bulk and mass that is an appropriate level to put, and looking for that height exception is somewhat inappropriate. So I would say that if you're going for that height exception, you're going to need to be able to pull that back and re-articulate that side with fenestration so that it is not so pervasive looking down into the neighbor's yard.
Okay.
That would be my recommendation on location. Fine, stairwell. I would kind of reconceive that. I would also, to Stephen's first question about the top plate on the stair, are there different ways you can, that element itself doesn't need to be so tall. And if I'm the intersection to that element and the main roof line a bit problematic, I think there's something there you could re-articulate that in a way that's more successful. Those are my main concerns. I think I can't recall, I apologize because I don't have the plans while I'm looking at my screen, what the material on the stair is. Is that a metal clad stair exterior? Is that I remember that, Tristan? Am I speaking?
It's a sort of matte metal panel, yeah.
Matte metal panel, yeah.
It works in with the existing metal windows and whatnot. There are other options for that, but the intent was to have a sort of panelized look to that stair. Now, obviously, if we're talking about removing the lantern look, we'd probably reconsider, sort of where we go with that.
Yeah, I think one thing, and again, I appreciate the effort to articulate that and make it into an element. I think what I prefer to see is sort of the reverse, to some degree, minimizing the stair as an element of the project and maximizing the articulation in the actual building itself. Yeah. So that I would kind of turn it on its head and say that the facades of the actual two-story addition integrated in with the current existing home could be articulated in the same way, maybe not with metal panels or whatnot, but the same treatment, the same effort that is going into the stair could go into the massing of the building.
Yeah,
and that's like just a different way, maybe a different approach to look at it.
Speak to both of these comments quickly, because I think there's something that I appreciate, that the massing is a real challenge. And I understand that there's a desire here that's been enunciated to minimize the mass. One of the things that drove this with the walls and the way the walls are articulated, and I think some of y'all are architects and design professionals, we completed a remodel in this in 2019. We have some this is seismic zone D. It's got a high lateral force. So we're very limited in how we treat this before we really start to undo everything that was done 2 years ago. And as you all know, I respond to my clients. My clients have said, look, we don't want to go any further backwards than we have to on this. So one of the reasons we stayed with the gable roof is because it lended itself to sort of a simple sort of stacking of the elements that would allow us to minimize to maximize the amount of shear envelope we get on the exterior walls and to minimize what we have to do on the inside. And I know that that's not a design criteria or things like that, but it was driving a number of the design decisions that we made on the exterior. So when we back up from that, we start to reduce the mass, and I appreciate that that's a goal here, but it's not in the code. We are within the building code, we are within our rights, and I'm doing my best to represent my clients and not undo what they did and spend a bunch of money on. And I know money doesn't come in here as a criteria, but it is an important criteria for me. So that's what's driving the massing. I understand all of the points of view that are taken here, but I do want to be crystal clear that there are other considerations here beyond just design.
Right. Thank you for answering his questions, Tristan. Mark, did you have more comments, or should we move over to Stephen now?
I think that catches it all. Thank you.
Stephen?
I don't need to be long-winded. I agree with what everyone has said. Really everyone in this whole group here on both sides of the coin. I think that I'm not satisfied with the massing, or not just the massing, but just the design. You know, it just looks a little clunky up there. And I think that it just needs a little bit more kind of articulation, a little bit more kind of interest, a little bit more variation. It looks a little blocky. I'm not satisfied with the staircase tower being so big or being so light, and I'm concerned about its light effect. I'd like to know from Matthew, is the approval from council, or is Henry, Mr. Wachowski, correct in quoting that the approval of the exception is related to a finding that the council has to make related to injury to neighboring privacy?
Generally, yes. There are findings that have to be made for this particular exception that's being sought, exception to height. There has to be a finding made that it is essentially consistent with the purposes of design review, the design review parameters and criteria. There are very specific findings, and I would have to look those up in the code really quickly to quote them, but
No, that's okay. I wanted to know the spirit of it. I get it. Thank you.
yes, Mr. Wachowski captured the spirit of what is required for the council to make the approval.
Yeah, so with that, I think that it is injurious in terms of its privacy, but I think that could be solved with reducing the amount of windows that face this property. And I think stepping it back a little bit would do two things. It would solve some of our concerns about the blockiness of the appearance of the building. I think that both Marks are correct to point out that, you know, we all see buildings next to us, and seeing the second floor of buildings is just kind of a natural part of the environment here. But I think the way that the design is currently done is just with a lot of glass that faces his property. And so I think that with those modifications, we could find that that's mitigated enough. And I think the group has said this collectively, that we can find that those things are mitigated enough to find it's appropriate to support the exception. But I think as currently designed, I can't support that idea of that exception. And I don't think that the design currently quite fits into the design standards either. And I think we've all said that a little bit. But I think that I don't think that the project needs to be scrapped. I think that with some modifications, that it could be approvable.
David, could you just, sorry, you are all probably a little more, I tried to familiarize myself with the design standards, but obviously you look at these a lot more than I do. So maybe you could just clarify what you mean by not fitting into the design standards so that I have a better understanding of where you're coming from.
Well, I think, and for every project, it's different because there are lots of different designs around the town. But I think as far as your purposes are concerned, you could just sort of take the very good summary that Stephen just gave you of the decreasing the massing, not having the lantern effect, especially at the stairwell, having less windows, look down on the neighbor's yard. I would think those would be the main issues.
Okay, so that, yeah, it just sounded like it was more expansive. So I just wanted to make sure I understood where we were going with that.
No, I think the issues are manageable. I just meant to tie it back like to our charge, which is just, you know, we're trying to put it through the lens of the design review criteria, which relate, you know, have specific wording around mass and scale and lantern effect, or maybe it doesn't, but whatever, you know, just general fitting in a nice kind of symbiotic way.
No, okay, I think I just misunderstood and thought you were talking about something slightly larger than that. No, okay, I get it.
Okay, great. So Matthew, I mean, I think Stephen just gave a great summary of all of our comments. Are you good with that? Do you need us to sum them up again? Because I think we're all pretty unanimous in how we view the project. Is that good as far as your notes are concerned?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time. So our recommendation is, as Stephen said, that we would not recommend town council approve this project as is, and we would like to see it again. And that is the end of this agenda item. And then the ADR members now will move on to item 6, the communication with staff, if there is any. And thank you for your time and participation, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
So Matthew and Patrick, is there any communication you have for us?
Yeah, I don't believe I have any communication from staff at this point, other than we had the question at the last meeting whether or not we'd be having a December meeting. The plan right now is to have a December ADR meeting. And as we discussed before the meeting started, I might be adding to my family at that point, so I may not be for it. But Matthew is clearly capable of running the meeting if I'm not here. But we are planning on having that meeting. So if anyone does have travel plans or think you won't be able to attend, please let us know ahead of time so we can make sure we have a quorum.
Will you confirm that date again? I just want to check to make sure it's.
It is
15th.
Yeah, the third Tuesday of December, the 15th.
Okay.
Oh,
If I have one other item that I just wanted to bring up with, I want to get the pulse of the other members and then maybe a recommendation from Matthew. One
you
of the
are going to have a baby too, are you?
No babies?
Yeah,
Nope, got it. 17-year-old, not going there. When you send out the notice to the neighbors, I really, number one, appreciate you giving us the phone numbers and information of the neighbors. One of the things that I found over the course of the years, I prefer not to be toured the site if at all possible. A lot of times they ask us and put us in really awkward position, asking like, what do you think? Are you going to support this? It's very awkward in that particular environment when you haven't had time to absorb what you've just seen or what you're seeing it live. So if you have communications with these homeowners, maybe it might be nice to say, giving access to the ADR members is really important because we all want to see this site, and there's no need to, handhold them.
Or some prefer not to be accompanied if it's appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how. I am not speaking for the rest of you guys, but just over the course of the years, you kind of want to do your thing, and you're looking at it, you're taking mental notes, maybe you're writing some notes, and having the homeowner sort of give you a tour, or even the design professional, pretty unnecessary. We're all capable of reading plans and whatnot. And then one other item would be sometimes in this particular example for the adjacent property, I didn't feel comfortable going in his backyard because I didn't feel as if we had that right. So sometimes when we have properties that seem to be contentious from a neighbor perspective, I would like to be able to have access to that property as well to see their point of view. The pictures were great that they sent. So I don't know how we facilitate that, but I was stuck like, oh, I want to go back there, but I don't feel like I can go, especially in COVID. I'm not going anywhere that people don't let me. But I wanted to highlight if there are those opportunities that we can do that would make our review of the project more comprehensive.
So I think whenever you're visiting someone's private property, to some extent, you're sort of visiting under their rules to some extent, right? And
totally agree.
I totally agree with you that ADR group members should not go on private properties without permission of the owners. However, if you do have permission of the owners and you're comfortable, you can do that. I would say that also, and this may be different for different ADR group members. Some of them may actually like the tour because you maybe gain some information. I think it really to some extent is up to the individual ADR group member. But I think to some extent also you kind of have to put up with the tour and kind of expect it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with an ADR group member saying, I'd like to visit and I'm happy to talk with you for a few minutes. Is it also okay if I spend a little bit of time on my own, making my own observations? And that's really something that I think should be, at least the way we set up site visits, that should be something that's handled by each ADR group member, unless we get to a point where we're organizing these at more of a staff level and making it more of a, and I don't see that happening.
Don't need you to do that. Nope, too hard to coordinate.
But thank you for also conveying that, because I can also provide those sentiments when I do speak to the applicants as well. And
I think that maybe just what you said is actually a really nice setup. Like it gives us a little bit of freedom and leeway to say, I'm happy to meet you on the site. Totally happy with that. But we're here to to review the site, we don't need to be, depending on each individual ADR purpose, they have the opportunity to say that. I just wanted, I want to kind of bring that out. I think
Yeah,
the
no-
other piece of accessing the adjacent sites might be nice. A lot of the times they offer it because they want you to come and see their viewpoint, but sometimes it isn't there. Joey, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Well, I just always say to them, because I agree with you, I don't like the tour. I don't want to hear their spiel about it. I want to have just a really clear mind with the drawings in my hands. And I just say, thank you so much for the access. I can read drawings. I'm fine to do this on my own. And please don't feel like you need to be here. And it's kind of it's a little bit of a sneaky way of just saying, like, please don't be here. Yeah. I can do it on my own. And, every once in a while they're there and I'll just say, well, why don't you just show me what you're doing? And then if you don't mind, I'd like to just walk by myself for a while. And that kind of works.
Okay. Thank you for that tip. That's good.
Yeah.
All right. That would be great. Matthew, if you happen to have those conversations, that's great. And again, it's only a couple projects. Others are not an issue like that.
Well, like Matthew could say to them, a lot of these ADR members actually prefer to just tour on their own. So don't worry about it. It just could be like an offhand comment, like don't fret if you can't be there.
Right. I remember when the architects used to try to schedule visits with us. It was like, no. You don't need to be. You don't need to come from the city and the East Bay to like come let me into the show me a story pole. Like I get that.
So I often get questions from applicants about the site visits, so I can sort of emphasize those sentiments that they don't really need to be there if they don't want to be there. They don't have to meet with the ADR group members. They can, it doesn't have to impact their schedule, that kind of thing. So I can plant that seed, if you will.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Matthew, are you still looking for comments on those two projects you emailed about? Or are you okay?
Yes, I am. And I did just want to mention, and those, because those items were not on the agenda, we shouldn't really discuss those.
Yeah, I understand.
But I did want to mention that sometimes ADR group members, you'll receive an email from me that's not personalized. It's, titled "Hello ADR group member" or something along those lines. Usually an indication that I'm sending that to the overall group, that it's not just to you. So just, if there's any question as to what the activity is, if you receive an email that's not personalized, it's typically going to more than one ADR group member. And that's just for your own information.
Okay.
And just a little more information on that. It's something Matthew and I have been discussing, is that we really want to utilize the ADR group as a resource beyond just bringing projects, in the more formal setting of these meetings. It's great to have your input on projects that may not necessarily need to be elevated to this level. So we probably will be reaching out more often with just kind of getting some feedback from you, because it's a valuable tool that we have in this town.
I will say, Patrick, I think it's a great idea, and apologize, maybe one or two we can't get to, but hopefully you get enough responses from the group. Keep doing it. I was going to make one comment about something that I was sensing with the group. I don't think this group knew the changes that had occurred to the ADU guidelines. And I would wonder if there are changes to the code, to the guidelines, et cetera, that occur in the future that you think impact our ability to make good design recommendations and decisions. Let us know so we can review those sections. I don't know when that occurred. It was potentially before both your times. But I was caught off guard a little bit. I think as it was Joey, I was under the impression it was 600 square feet and had some other, I didn't know about the height criteria and those types of things. So if you happen to see something that as you guys are working through modifying, changing regulations and whatnot, and just give us a heads up and we'll be a little smarter.
I agree. Actually, if you have it in a cohesive, just a little, summary, I would like to know the latest ADU requirements, because it seems like they're just getting less and less and less restrictive. Like I don't even feel like we have any power to adjudicate anything about an ADU anymore. that the state wants them so badly that things that would have never been allowed 2 or 3 years ago are coming before us. And I just need to know, like, what do we have to approve, or what do we have no control over?
Nothing. I think the answer is that it's still that you have to find that you approve of it from a design standpoint to support it.
Yeah, Stephen's absolutely right. It's if it's they are becoming much more permissive, the standards. But if it's something that falls into those standards, it's not going to go in front of you. So you don't have to worry about whether or not, you know, your hands are tied. If it's going in front of this group, it means that they're asking for something beyond what the state requires. And so then it's discretionary. We can choose whether or not to approve it. And so then we do call on your charge, which is to apply the design standards.
So treat it no differently. You know, give it no benefit.
Right.
And give it no. Yeah.
Well, like, for example, this last one, you know, they can go up to a certain FAR, but does that mean they should, you know, with a living room?
When he says that it's allowed by right, we shouldn't talk about the project, but if someone says this is allowed by right, it's fine for them to say that, but we know that not always can you build to the envelope of what's allowed, because it might be inappropriate from a contextual standpoint, and we have to say so.
Yeah.
The exception, this one probably wouldn't have come before us if it didn't have the height exception. Okay.
Yeah, that's the trigger for this discretionary ADU, is that it's seeking an exception for height.
But kind of once it triggers that, then it's just in for a penny, in for a pound in terms of your design expertise, Joey.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. All right. I think I just need to study that. Even it just seems like the ADU thing keeps changing and it getting more permissive. So I guess maybe a really good thing would be, Patrick and Matthew, before every ADU comes up before us, just quick bullet points about, like, what's the latest from the state, if anything's changed.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I agree, we have to discuss it on the merits of the design. But, you know, if someone's coming with the point of view that this is my right and I'm going to go before the town council, I'm going to get this one way or another, we kind of need to know a little bit of that.
Well, yes, definitely. And I can provide you with some information on those ADU parameters, what qualifies for ministerial and what qualifies for discretionary. But it's important to note that if an ADU, a proposed ADU, does not comply with any single ministerial, or if there's any ministerial requirement that it does not apply, that it does not comply with, the entire project is subject to discretionary review.
Right.
So if it is before you, then there's nothing guaranteed, if you will. The entire project is subject to design review, just like any other project is subject to design review. Yes, there are maximum FARs and you know, certain setbacks and things like that, but it still must meet the design review requirements as well as the other aspects of the code. And that would go for a discretionary ADU.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that, Matthew? So I'm sorry if I'm being dense here. If a person builds a new home and it conforms with all the setbacks, all the FAR, all the code requirements, does that trigger a design review? But if someone was going to build an ADU that also complied with all the ADU and the, you know, those criteria, but that doesn't require doesn't trigger a design review.
That's correct.
Review. Why is that now?
That's to try to ease the burden of people putting in ADU, so they can bypass these kinds of.
But don't the ADUs, regardless of how they, I mean, just like a home that complies with all of the setbacks, etc., is subject to our design standards and criteria. Why isn't an ADU that complies subject to design standards and criteria? Shouldn't it be like, shouldn't it be the same? Or is it the state that's saying you can't apply to design review to that?
Right.
It's saying hands off, right?
The reason a new home is subject to design review is because it meets one or more of the design review criteria. It's adding more than 200 square feet of floor area. It's creating a new building. It is, or it's relocating a building. You know, one of those two very simple criteria. An ADU would normally meet that definition as well, but the state has specially identified an ADU as a separate category of project that if it meets all those check boxes, is not subject to those discretionary review requirements.
Trying to streamline it to make the barrier of entry.
Totally
lower.
get it, and I appreciate that clarification. I
Yeah.
did not understand that nuance.
Well, the
Totally.
reason why is otherwise towns could just decide, okay, great, you're making us build these things. Fine, it has to go through ADR review and nothing's gonna pass ADR review.
Yeah.
And
no,
so people throw up these roadblocks to prevent things like that being built in their towns. And that's the whole point of the state law. Whether or
Yeah,
not
I-
I agree with it, that's their rationale.
It as Joey said, it definitely handcuffs us in the ability to, maintain the style, the mass, the bulk of the town, right? It is definitely. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Only
And
for
800
those
square
that do
feet.
not only for those that do not require design review, Mark, right?
I totally understand it. Yeah, but 950 square feet. That's my house. That's my whole house. Like that is
No, I mean, it's
crazy
such,
town. It's
such a huge amount of square footage. I mean,
Maybe you
Just-
should double your house.
just
I've
3
thought
years
about.
ago-
Believe me, Mark. What do you think's going through my head? But I'm in setbacks all over the place.
3 years ago,
Yeah.
it was 500. It was 500.
One clarification on the floor area. The code has just been updated so that the 150 square feet for ingress egress is not actually floor area. It would be exterior improvements. So that would be like an unenclosed landing or a patio. The reason this project is moving forward is because it's under the current code, which actually allows for that 150 square feet to be floor area. This is probably the only project that will move forward under this code. So moving forward, it will be more of an 800 square foot allowance or exception for floor area, and then 150 square feet for exterior area.
Does that change January 1st?
It actually changes 30 days from the last council date.
It's a code update in our ADU code.
Local code.
Well, this project might not get there in time then.
This project is evaluated under the rules that were in place when the application was submitted. So
Okay, got it. Okay.
yeah, it's sort of
Thanks.
grandfathered in under those rules.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Is everyone good?
Yes.
Thank you for all those clarifications and staying late to answer some
Sure.
of those. It's
Yeah.
Well, I can end the meeting too, and then we can always chat after.
No.
But we're still being recorded, and poor Patrick and Matthew are here. So I suggest we adjourn the meeting.
second that.
Someone second it? Mark seconds it. Great. And so
Third.
the meeting is adjourned. We can stop